Hello, everybody. So I'm so delighted to welcome Dr. Esther Zeledon, also known as Dr. S, to the show. She's an accomplished life purpose coach, international diplomat, scientist, and the author of the new book, Creating Your Limitless Life. The transformational guide promises to help high achievers define personal success, build their legacy, and gain clarity to maintain their biggest dreams. Dr. S draws from her pioneering work, empowering people across cultures, countries, and corporations to create a formula for crafting your limitless life. We'll be digging into her powerful model to turn that little inner voice urging you towards something bigger into an empowering roar. If you feel called toward living life on your own terms, aligned with your true purpose, tune in for a practical step you can start taking today. And we'll also be covering like her author journey, like how she was able to write the book, some of the pitfalls, some of the obstacles she faced, and how she overcame it to finally write the book and then publish it. So, Esther, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Great. And I noticed that your book cover, on the book cover, like you have literally cut Chasing American Dreams, and then you have your book title, Creating Your Limitless Life. I mean, why do you do it? Like, what's the difference between American Dreams and Limitless Life in your POV?
Oh, a huge difference. So for me, and the American dream, how I refer to it is, it's not that just the U.S., right, or America as we know it, right? The American dream is something, it's universal. Everyone's around the world, right? That the American dream is a common, phrase that people use to seeking out something better, right? Either finding more opportunities somewhere else, or they think about it in terms of hope and wealth. The problem with the American dream, though, is that it's based on a universal dream that's all the same for everybody. And it's also based on like fixed timelines. So it's based on, for example, being like, oh, you need to get married by you're 30. You need to have a house by the time you're 35. You need to have a title and a secure business or job by the time you're this age. And then if you haven't made those things by what society defines as the dream, then you haven't made it and haven't succeeded. So my book challenges that, though, that your limitless life is whatever you want it to be, right? You may not want a house. You might never want children. You might never want to be married. You might want to rent and maybe just have homes for investment. There's so many possibilities. And the thing is, like, everyone's dream is different, everyone's gift is different one, everyone has a unique value that's unique to them. So for me, that definition is so rigid that for me that's why I crossed it out, right? We're not trying to chase the American dream. Instead, we're trying to create what our own limitless life is.
Mm. A few years ago, I saw this movie called Limitless. Like it is one of my favorite movie. Like, the guy, like the actor, like he takes some pill and then suddenly he is using his brain to his 100% capacity, and he is successful now in his career, and he's really good with everyone. So, for you personally, like how, what's your definition of limitless life in your life?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll first define like what limitless is in general. So limitless means that you're living out your full legacy, whatever you define as your ultimate anything, right? So that dream that you had when you were a kid, the dream that you have now, that vision that you're like, oh, that'd be amazing. That's what it is. Because in the end of the day, all of us can achieve it. But what stops us is ourselves, right? It's what stops us is our mindset, our own doubts, our own belief systems that we think we can't do it. And that's not true, right? We can all accomplish anything we want, and it's really up to us to make that happen. So for me, limitless for me was having complete creative freedom to do what I wanted to create what I want, and to be able to have a movement where I could inspire. And the thing is, I was the person that chased the American dream, and I chased it my entire life, because I grew up I was born in Nicaragua, and my parents immigrated when I was a young child to the United States. So we escaped the Civil War and we had nothing, and there's another crazy story in between that I almost died. And then my dad won the lotto. And so they spent all their money to save my life. And then, of course, when it comes down to immigrating with the Civil War, we had nothing. So we grew up with no money in the United States, paycheck to paycheck. And I knew I grew up with the double burden, not just of growing up with no money, but also feeling like had I not been born, my parents would have had money, right, to been better off in the United States. So I felt this, I had to give to my family, I had to make things better. I had to chase the American dream to provide. And so I did all that, right? And I went to best students, went to the best schools, and then I went to the workforce and I climbed the ladder. And when I climbed the ladder, and of course, I was always me deep down. I always found ways to find my way to inspire and help people along the way, but it was always in my free time and not in my core hours, right? My core hours, I was just work hard, put your head down to make it, right? But then, I once I had reached the American dream. And I remember sitting there, and at that time I was a diplomat, and I had the 5 bedroom house, I had the status position, I had the wealth, I had the full staff that helped me with the children, like all the things that you see in movies. I
Mm.
was super unhappy. I was miserable because it wasn't my life. I felt that I wasn't living my life. And even though there were parts of the job
Yeah.
that were amazing, that I could impact people, that, had some alignment with me. There was a lot of the other parts that didn't, right? And I also felt that I wasn't free to be creative, right? I was a representative for a country and for an organization, so I couldn't be creative on what I wanted to say or do or inspire. I had to do it within these bounds. And for me, the limitless came in is when I decided I needed to have the courage, right? Here I was motivating countries,
Mm.
countries, communities, everybody to follow their dreams and follow their purpose and giving them money to do that, right? Through the organization. But I wasn't doing that for myself. And when I finally was like, okay, I need to do this for myself, right? I'm here telling everyone else they can, but then I tell myself I can't, right? And that I don't deserve it, that I shouldn't do it, and then all the fear, I'm gonna fail, and so my limitless was when I decided that to believe in myself, and I decided to go after it, and so I left that and started what I have now, which is Be Exchange, which is a movement to help people become limitless. I mean, 92% of people give up on their dreams. Only 8% do it. And for me, that's a crazy statistic, right? Because we're like, how is that possible? We see so many successful people around on TV and around us and everything, but that's not their dream, right? So what we see sometimes doesn't match reality. And for me, I'm like, man, if people actually followed their dreams, like really what they really wanted and had that alignment, I really believe there'd be less terrorism in the world. There would be less violence, there'd be less anxiety, less depression, because people would be living out what they feel is the limitless, right? And that's what I feel today. Like I have full creative freedom today. I love creating and I love being able to have time, flexibility. I loved that I downsized and now live in a place that I have view of the ocean every day. That was something that like I really wanted, right? It wasn't to me about having the 5 bedroom house. For me, it was about living somewhere where I could have a view, where I could wake up every morning and be like, ah, this is living, right? And so that's it for me. It's like having that flexibility, being able to travel, have time with my family, have creative freedom, and being able to inspire and make a difference every day.
And what do you think? What's the number one obstacle holding most people uh, from major change or creating their limitless life or follow their dream?
It's fear. I would
Mm.
say that's the biggest one is fear. And that fear is rooted in a lot of different things, right? So like the main things I would say fear is rooted in is fear of losing everything they've built, right? A lot of us have been sold to chase those check marks, right? And so we've also been sold that our whole value is based on the title that we have. So to then say to someone, yes, you can go after your dream, for them, their dream feels so drastically different than the life they live today that they're like, for me to go after that, I'm like, I would put my family in jeopardy, or that would be super selfish of me, or I will lose everything that I've built and I can't. And a lot of the people I work with, it's like financial stability is really important, right? And so
Yeah.
they feel that losing that is too risky. So fear's number one. And then second is like, they don't want to feel, anytime they've brought it up to anybody, people are like, but your life's perfect. Your life's amazing. You need to be more grateful. You need to appreciate what you have. And so then there's guilt of feeling that they want to go after this when they have, the basics, right? And a lot of us grew up being like, at least I did with my family, that was like everyone, all these people have it worse than you. And so, you have to appreciate every day. And I am a person of full appreciation and gratitude, but that doesn't mean you could still appreciate today and still go after what you want and create that limitless, because in the end, when you actually go after your dream and everything, you're going to make more of a difference and more impact because it's something that you love. And I
Yeah.
think that's the connection people are missing, because they get so boggled into the voices telling them like, no, you're being selfish, that they're like, you know what, let me just, it's not practical, it's not realistic, let me go back to my day. Or they feel that it's too late. And that's the problem with that check marks, right? Because we're told by this age we should have something. And so then they're like, I'm too old, it's too late. But it's not true. It's never too late. Like we overestimate we can do in a year, but we
Yeah.
underestimate what we can do in 5.
Exactly.
And, and even if you're midlife, like myself, like, I mean, like, we still have 40 years left to live or more. And like 5 years is nothing. You know what I mean? 5 years is a drop in the bucket. And and also it doesn't have to be a change that's one day to the next. That's the next thing. It's like if people are like, oh, I have to drastically change everything like tomorrow. But that's not true either, right? You can make a plan, and a lot of my book talks about that. It's that you can plan it out over 5 years. Things can be very incremental. It could be done in such a way that you could be working. And if you, let's say your dream was to start a business, you can start your business on the side while you're still working, right? And you can make transitions that don't affect your finances or your life. Or you could do it in such a way that you're gaining the skills while you're starting. But as long as you're starting, you're already starting to feel more right in alignment. And it doesn't matter if it takes 2, 5, or 10 years. What matters is that you get there and you don't give up on it.
Yeah. I was talking to an author as well as a speaker the other day. I think the last week, and he was in, I think, late 80s, and we were talking about the dream and the passion. He mentioned to me that I have a few of my friends like who are no more, and when I was interacting with them when they were at the last stage, um, most of them they had regrets and that they didn't do what they wanted to do. The society wanted them to be like a certain way. And when he actually, I asked him that what still motivates you, what inspires you to still go on stage and speak and still promote the book, all kind of stuff. Then he was saying that I really don't want to left any stone unturned. That at the deathbed, I would also feel the same way. uh, that's gonna be a really big regret that I'll have. So that's why like I try to live my life to the fullest. And I think that's what is called like having a limitless life. Uh, Going in the future, seeing yourself on the deathbed and seeing like what are the things that uh, you should do today so that you will not have regret later on. So
Exactly, exactly. And so like it's funny you said that, because one of the first exercises that I have in the book is that it's like you have to simulate death. Like if you die today, what would
yeah.
your obituary say? Because so
Mm,
many of us, we are like, we don't want to think about death because it's so negative, and I don't even want to think about it, because sometimes we're worrying about
yeah.
things happening throughout the day. We don't want to give ourselves that anxiety. But there is something intentional about going, like you said, into death and writing it down, because the minute you write it down, you're like, I don't really want my obituary to say that. I want it to be so much more. But then what is that so much more? And then you have to rewrite it. What do you want it to say? And then let's map it out so that people will actually say those things, right? And it will be that when you pass away. And it's such a key part because I think that's when we stop and really reflect on our life as a whole and realize that no one is talking about your titles when you die. No
Yeah.
one is talking
No.
about what thing you wore. They're talking about what impact you had on them and what impact you had on this planet.
I'm not sure like where exactly I've heard this, but there was this guy who made billions of dollars, right? I'm not sure whether this is a story or this is a real thing, but I've heard maybe someone saying this. This guy I think made $5 or $10 and he at the end of the life he was just able to spend maybe just $1 billion. Um, he was saying to all the other people at the deathbed that I wasted uh, 1/6 of my life m- trying to just make money and money. I was able to just spend $1 billion, and the remaining um, four, five, $6 billion, like I was not able to spend. So I can't take that money to where I'm going right now after my death. So I'm also wondering that you mentioned a lot about finding your purpose and like what's your process of like how do you teach people to find your purpose? Like for me, for I think for most of the people, most of the children, they in the childhood they wanted to become maybe an astronaut and then they wanted to become a doctor or something else and then something else. Like even when at this stage of my life, every 3 years, like the things that I want to do changes. How do you find your true authentic purpose and follow that? And is it okay for that purpose to change, like in the
Yeah.
future? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And actually you brought up a really good topic. So purpose is in all languages, I think it translates to intention. And actually my favorite definition of purpose is actually a Hindi word. And I don't know if I'm saying it wrong, so if the listeners can correct me, Udesha, which means like your higher,
Uddeshya. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yes, your higher place. Right. So purpose is like, so in my book, I differentiate, right? So there's purpose and there's also goals, right? So you should align your goals, your milestones, and your steps to fulfill and live your purpose every day to leave a lasting legacy, right? So legacy is like the point A to B, but
Yeah.
your purpose is your everyday, which you bring. But purpose is not like a destination, right? It can be your legacy is the destination, but your purpose is who you are every day and what you want to bring out. So you mentioned a couple of very interesting parts. So one of the exercises I do is thinking about your childhood dream. So you mentioned, for example, it could change now, but I want to challenge that. The thing is, the title of the thing that you want to do has changed, but the how you want to do that and what you bring to that world has not. So I'm going to give you an exercise right here. I'm going to put you on the spot. So if you have $2 billion, so actually let's start that over. You have to pick one global problem to
Mm.
solve. What would you pick?
I think the number one problem that actually comes to my mind is definitely going to be the education. Um, we're especially working with youth. Uh, I see that the entire education system, especially in our country, like is kind of broken. We don't teach anything that is kind of relevant for the real life or like when they graduate from the colleges or high school. So I definitely want to, in case if I have infinite money, then I definitely gonna be working in that direction, like working on the education, working with the youth, because that's the future generation. Like that's the world we'll be creating.
Okay. So the G7 loves your answer. You're like, that was an amazing answer. I love it. I need you to give me more detail on how you're going to do that. How are you going to work with the youth to improve the education system? Or how are you going to do that? How are you going to solve it?
So that's a kind of a tough question, but if I'm going to break it into multiple steps, I think I'll definitely gonna leverage the social media initially. Like that's the very uh, initial step where I'm gonna leverage YouTube and Instagram, especially TikTok, to interact with the youth, like where exactly they hang on, and not only me, like I'll try to create courses completely for free that actually they're gonna be using in their life. For example, financial literacy, learning how to in like developing some skill sets, right? All kind of stuff, not the things that they are learning in their school and colleges, like mathematics and like they're already learning it, but the things that is actually going to be applicable in their real life. Um, and I would try to work with some really great teachers and professors, like, and we can work together and build some sort of organization and creating these lectures completely for free so that it can reach as much as masses. And along with that, some way or the other way, like I'll try my best to also reach to some government uh, uh, people, like who are in politics, like who can actually make the changes in the education, like real education system as well. For example, nobody teaches you to understand like how mind works, how to think, right? In the school, in the high school or the college. So maybe meditation, focusing more on sports. So nobody teaches that. So these are some of the steps that I initially can think of in order to make that change happen.
That's fantastic. So I heard that you first, when you're solving problems, you break it down into steps. You think about how you can reach, make the mass change more effectively, how best to reach people. And then you also like do a lot of like gap analysis, like what's missing, what could we bring, how can I persuade. So now my question is, when you think about your approach, how you were using this approach to solve this problem, do you use that same approach in your personal life and
Uh,
for other problems?
yeah, actually, most of the time. Especially in our, of course, now, uh, I don't focus more towards the goal that I shared with you. But for example, whenever I meet youth, right, especially like who are having issues or problems, like they're not clear what to do in their career or their life, I try my best to give them the right type of advice, give them pros and cons, exactly what to do, what not to do. Sometimes like we also like me and my wife go to orphanage over here, like uh, there are a lot of children's like um, over here, like young children's. We try to be there, we stay there, and then we share some informations with them as well. Of course, we help them financially as well, but I really enjoy working with them and staying with them. So, like as of now, in my life, I don't work on that level, but yeah, trying my best to do it on some level.
But do you use that same process? Like, so if a
No,
friend came to you
hmm,
and said, man, Victor, I have a huge problem at my job, or I have a huge problem with a friend of mine. When you give advice, do you follow that same process? Do you go, okay, let's break it down into steps. Let's think about what you're missing,
yes, of
and
course.
then yeah.
Yes, of course. Going deep down, understanding what's their problem, what's the root cause, and then eventually trying to giving them the solution.
Yep. So your how is your unique value. So like how you described to me how you would solve that problem is super unique to you. No one answers that question on how. So like the global problem, everyone has very similar ones, right? World peace, education, division, right? Water,
Mm.
anything. But the how they solve it for every single person, it's very different. And that is your unique value add. So even if you went tomorrow and started a whole different business, a whole different thing, or went to a whole different career path, you would still bring how you would solve it, anything, to that place. And so that is how that ties in. So it doesn't matter that you're whatever, if you want to change your job or your business or try something different, right? You're still bringing in a part of your unique how to every situation and everything in your life. And similarly, you know how you talked earlier about kids, right? They might say doctor, astronaut, right?
Yeah.
Our kid says the same thing, lawyer. But I've done this with kids, right? First and fourth grade. Even when you have a room of 20 kids that have the same career choice, the attributes and the characteristics of why they want to do that is all so different. So you can have ten kids say doctor. One will say, I want to be a doctor because I want the people time with the patient. I want to be able to give them quality care and solve their problem and talk to them. Another one might be, I want to be a surgeon. I want to have detail, go in and like see how this functions, solve their body problem, you know what I mean? And like really go in, microscope, dig deep. Another one might say, I want to be able to work alongside other doctors that we together think about new diseases and cure. So you see how it's all different. So even if it's doctor, what they see in that career path for every kid, it's a total different lens because they're looking at it like that's what I know right now of a possibility. That's what I see as a vehicle where I can live out my purpose, right? It's just what information they have at hand. But it's still through the lens of like we're always seeking places of where we can bring our how to into, right? And so part of the whole exercise that I do in that roadmap is like first, it's like unpacking, right? So I gave you one part of it, right? But the book and the workbook go really deep, like really unpack this unique how to, and then test it, right? Do you do it in your professional life? Do you do it in your personal life? And then ask 5 of your friends, how have you impacted their life and how? And then when you get back those answers, you're like, oh my God, this is what I do all the time. And then it's like, what do you love? And then what impact do you want to make in the world? And like, what's your legacy? And like, and then even more than that, the other side of purpose is also our toolkit and our resilience. So that's something that for me, I never saw like in books. So I've always been obsessed with purpose, right? And I read, like I said, I grew up with no money, but I had access to a library and I would read all these books, right? And people would share, purpose is so important, purpose is so important. And I would sit there and go, okay, but you haven't told me how to find my purpose, right? And I would get so frustrated because I'm like, I know it's important, I know I have to have it, but I want you to tell me how I find it. So for me, it was like really important to give the how the how to. But the other side of it is like once I discovered it for myself, what I found challenging was how do I keep it going and how do I not get lost in the noise of like either chasing the American dream or everybody telling you that you need to be doing something different or like, when you give up, like how do you keep that going? And so the other side of that I have as part of your purpose formula is resilience. Like, what have you overcome? Because on the flip side, when you have this great how to and this great gift to the world, it also brings and attracts, right? The other negative side of things, right? That could
Yeah.
also, put you astray or put you and make you vulnerable. So, what are the things have you overcome, and what did you do to help you overcome them? Because that is unique to you. So, like for example, for me, like I overcame depression, anxiety, and like I also stay in things way too long. Like I have business partnerships or friends, and sometimes I know that we need to part ways, but I stay and stay because I'm like, things are going to get better, and they don't. But by studying that though, right? That's my other side because in my purposes, I like to, help people discover their purpose and live it. Sometimes I want to see them live it, and so that's the downside. But when you look at that, What you overcome, because you're always that person, you're going to keep overcoming it. So rather than using that toolkit only when you hit rock bottom, only when things get hard, what about we incorporate all those great things that helped you into your everyday routine so that when it does, something, negative does happen, you're not going to hit rock bottom because it's already in your preventative routine. So that's the other part that I incorporate into your purpose because it's still part of you. It's still part of your intention, right? So your intention is also bringing in your how to, but also making sure you're taking care of yourself while you're doing that to prevent, to prevent anything from stopping you from showing up every day that way.
Um, I love it. So I had a call with one of your friends yesterday, Renzo, like who needed some of our services, and he speaks highly of you, by the way. So he literally shared with me the workbook that he's working on that you shared, right? Like,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
and he showed me that what he has filled and everything. Um, did you decide to create the workbook since the beginning of working on the book, or was it like after creating the book you decided that okay, I should also have a workbook so that people can have an actionable steps, just like what you did for me, like asking me certain questions so that identifying what's the purpose and everything. What was your process to deciding
Yeah.
to create the workbook?
I love the workbook. So at first, actually, I wanted the book to be just one piece. I wanted it to be the book is kind of also a workbook. And the thing is, it kind of is. So at first, I mean, funny story is that at first I didn't want to include any of my story in the book because I think I talked about it as I grew up. I was always told people have it way worse than you. So for me, I
Yeah.
was like, I wasn't trafficked. I don't have like I mean, actually now I realize I do have a crazy story, but when I was writing it, I didn't think I had a crazy story. I was like, I wasn't trafficked. I wasn't homeless. Sure, I've gone through a lot of challenges. I've immigrated. I almost took my life at 16. I have like all these crazy things that happened to me and happened to me once I got to the workforce. I'm very open about like even though I had a high position and I had 30 awards, I was also being bullied in silence. And that has been amazing in the sense that since I've shared that, I've gotten so much sharing from other people in similar roles, being like, that's me, and I can never share it because everyone looks up to me. I'm vice president, and no one would ever know that I'm going through this and I'm suffering in silence. But I didn't want to share any of that. At first I was kind of like, my story's not important. I just want to share my formula. I just
Yeah.
want to help millions of people around the world. I want to give
Mhm.
people clarity, and that's it. So in the beginning, when I wrote it initially, it was just my formula. It was all these questions and the application. And then when I went to the publisher, my author coach, she was like, no, you need to include your story. You know what I mean? Like we need to, because you are a product of your own
Yes.
book. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Right.
You are a living testimony that this works, and you cannot just include the little stories because I have testimonials from countries and communities and people, right, that I've share their transformation. They're like, that's great, but they're like, but there's nothing more than you are that living testament, right? So I wrote it, I wrote my story, and I almost deleted it 5, 10 times. And every time I was going to, every time I deleted the section, something would happen. Like I would run into somebody and they would share a story with me. And I would sit there with my eyes open because I was like, oh my God, that's the exact same thing that happened to me that I was deleting in my book. Okay, I need to go back in. And then I had to come in and say, it's not authentic unless I include everything. So, when people ask me on podcasts, is there something you don't want to talk about? I'm like, no, everything's in the book. Like it's all out there for the world. There's nothing that's not open. But but of course, adding in my story made the book really long. So what I had to do was, okay, what what can I include in the book that if people read the book, that they're going to come out clear? Okay, this is my purpose, right? And what can I extract that if someone's like, I read this book and I really want to do this like now. You know what I mean? Like I want to make this happen. And so that's when I extracted it and it said, okay, that's why the company workbook is so important, right? Like you've read the book, you're inspired, and you're like, I want to do this and I want to go even deeper, then the workbook does that for you. But more importantly for me, the workbook is that, as a kid, I think I mentioned that. I always go back to that because I couldn't afford a coach. You know what I mean? And I had these big aspirations. Like it sounds crazy now because sure now I travel all the time and I have this life. But back then I remember being 15 years old, traveling around the world. I only had gone on a plane to immigrate. You know what I mean? Like the thought of being able to afford a plane ticket to travel, it just seemed so far from my
Yeah.
reality. And being able to speak, like I was speech delayed as a kid, like and I was just like working hard. It just all those things I have now just seem so unobtainable. But I would read these books and do all the things in the books in the library. And of course, you can't write in them in the library. So that's why I have like lines in my book too, because I'm like, I want you to write in it, or if you have a Kindle. And and I wanted to, I would do all the exercise and I was like, I gotta figure this out and I gotta figure this out and research. And I mean, now people have internet, but back then I was like, I had to figure this out. So I wanted, for me, like, how you said about youth, it's also really important that I really hope that my book gets in youth hands. That's why I do speak a lot at universities for underserved communities because I really like to give that message there and I want them to have access to the workbook because I'm like, it's okay if you don't have access to coaching. My entire coaching program is in that workbook. Like if you follow it and do all those exercises, like go deep into the purpose exercises, then do that. Then I go step by step on how to map it out, right? From like goals, milestones to steps, and then your celebration calendar, your resilience, how to keep it going, how to put boundaries, how to say, how to like for example, like after you figure it out, how do you express the things you want to be sought out for? How do you say no to the things that you don't want to be sought out for? How do you have those conversations with your family? Because that was really hard for me, right? I
Yeah.
mean, Latino families, there are no boundaries. And I was like, okay, but I have to create them. How do I do that? And how do I do that in a way that's inviting, that's conversational, that's not hurtful? And so all of that's in there, right? Because I want someone to pick it up. Even if they can't work with me, that's okay. You have the whole workbook to do that with you. And so for me, that's how that workbook came to be. Like initially the vision was to have it in one piece, but then as the book evolved, it was kind of like, you know what? Now people have the option. If they love the book, you can get the workbook. And I also put the workbook um, at an affordable, like the 99 cents, because the workbook, I'm like, fine, you don't have the physical copy, but you can have it on your Kindle and do it on your paper, just like I did when I was a youth, right? And so it's like your own library on your phone.
Mm, love it. And in your case, I think your husband, Paul, like he's also part of your journey, right? Like he's also part of your mission now. How does this transition happen? Does he work with you like full time with you, or he also has his own thing going on? Like how your partnership works?
So I was married before Paul, and both of us were. And I talk about that in the book about, it's part of the chasing the American dream. We both got married younger and fulfilled that check mark. But when we met each other, we just had that full alignment. We met working and we met in the international development sphere and we met interviewing for that position actually. And we were actually friends and coworkers before we got together. And so we always had that amazing synergy. But then, we both had to climb the ladder differently within that organization and keep then our lives, professional lives separate. But we were always a partnership at home. But something that we always missed working together because we work really well together and we both have like same legacy. We want to make a difference in the world and he loves we love different aspects of it. Like I love the coaching aspect, he loves the educator part of the aspect and teaching and sharing stories, right? But it's a great compliment. So at first, so we went on so when leaving the diplomatic service, right, we had to do it in pieces. So he first left and opened his own consultancy, right? So he could still consult with these agencies. So at first, that's how we transitioned. Like, we don't know anything about how to open a business or anything, right? So he first had to go into that realm of like, how do we open a business? How does that work? How do I do just on consultancies? Once we knew that that could work, that gave me leeway to exit because we knew like, okay, he has his thing set up. We know it works. We know like the mechanics. And so then I can exit and start this movement, right? And I always call it a movement because to me it's much more than a business. It's like
Yeah.
it's a way to like change. To me, it's about changing the world, right? So I started that, and he stayed with the consultancy, and then now so that then I became like a lot more fledged in the business. But same thing, right? It's everything about calculated, right? Risks and path, right? It's just I am my own avatar. I am my own person I help, right? So the path is then as I started growing it, right? We were at a place where he was like, now I would like to be folded in with you. Even though he still does his consultancy, still has that arm with him. He's like, now it's time that we can both integrate. And so now he's been a lot more integrated in that, and we love it. Like we just came back from New Orleans, and it's the first time that we did a joint keynote.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was so amazing. Like we left there because the other conferences we have been doing separate speaking,
Mm.
but this one we had been doing the workshops together, and somebody saw one of our workshops and is like nominated us to be the keynote together. And we're like, wow, I've never seen keynotes together. But I'm like, if anybody can do it, I'm like, we can. And we did it, and it was so amazing. Like we were on fire. Like the crowd was on fire. I sold out of the books. And I always say that when I say that my name is on the book, I always say he's the silent author on it as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he was with me on that. It's my story, but it's still our process, and he's still a big part of that book. And so he promotes it the same, and then our second book we'll write together. And it was just so fire, like we dominated that stage. Like it just did amazing. And when we left that weekend, we said this is why we're doing this. This is what we want to do all the time. And 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 it brought us back to like when we first started. This is how we work together, making an impact, and we both bring our strengths. And I bring my vulnerability on stage, and he brings his relatability, and it impacts listeners all different, right? Different people were coming up to him and me, and we're just stronger together. And so that was part of the legacy that we wanted to build, and we include our kids in it. Like my son sells my books at his school, and he's hilarious, and he's sometimes on my Instagram, and my daughter makes us our business plans. Like for me, I always wanted that, like something that we could create as a family, as a unit, and build this legacy together, but that it has pieces of each of us that we can bring in our own purpose and build out like the future that we all want jointly. Yeah.
I'm curious, like, how does it feel to have a man in your life, like, who really supports you and put you in front? Because there are very, very few men out there in today's world. Like, for example, if their wife or the partner, the spouse, is doing better uh, in the professional life, maybe they have some male ego or some jealousy, like they don't want it to happen. But like, I've seen him getting on the podcasts, promoting your book, promoting you, and he puts you on the front. Now your kids are also joining the movement. How does it feel? And did you know that this is gonna happen, like when you met him, or uh, so tell me more about that.
Yeah. No, no, I knew that when I met him. So this is the thing. This is the other definition of limitless. When I was a kid, right back to my kid, I dreamed of being with someone like that. And the thing is, again, that felt very far. like very unlikely. Latino culture, exactly what you said. I mean, even in my culture, it was like it's very machismo, as they call it. Like men are just like, you serve me my food,
Yeah.
you come second, you have to be a
Mm.
good wife and good lady. And I grew up with that. Like you have to be a good lady, good wife, good this, good that, right? And you can't outshine. And so, but then that translated for me very negatively because then I felt that I needed like I had this regret for a long time. Like I had met this one man when I was younger, and I regretted it a long time because I let that go because he was entrepreneur and very successful and had wealth mostly. So I thought, oh my God, like I let that go. But I was looking for like a Prince Charming in a way. Like I thought, like, because I was taught that I would have to hang on to a man that had done those things, and that's the only way that I would be able to do those things.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I always dreamed of having a man that would be nurturing to children, but at the same time masculine, right? And that he would support me and that he could cook and would support my dreams and all that. But over time, I thought it didn't exist even though I always dreamed of it. And that's why, I got married first. And it's not that my first husband was a bad man. He was a great man, but just not for me. You know what I mean? Like I think my
Mm.
dreams were we didn't have this. I put at the end of the book that it's really important, even this purpose son, to do it as a family, like this whole purpose exercise, and even with the person that you're with, right? Because your legacies have to be aligned. And like even though me and my ex-husband had a lot in common, he's a great man. We had the love for like helping the world and volunteering and all that. We didn't have the same legacy. He liked making a difference on a smaller scale. And that's great. You know what I mean? And like, he's now remarried and he found someone that's super aligned with him. But for me, my change is global. And I never wanted to live in one place. I wanted to be able to travel and meet people all over the world and constantly be moving and changing and growing. And we never did those exercises. We had been to a lot of these marriage weekends and all these type of things that you do before you get married in our culture and my culture and they never talked about those things, right? It was about like having your finances in line and whether you want to parent correctly, but there was never a talk about like, do your dreams align? And I think had we had done that, we probably wouldn't have married each other because he would have been like, oh my God, wait, my life's going to be about traveling the world and doing all these things. And he liked traveling, but didn't want to like live other places. You know what I mean? They're very different. And I think had we discussed that, we could have avoided everything that we went through, right? While with Paul, when I met him, I really believe in synchronicity that like people like all these I don't believe in coincidences, things happen and we were interviewing it and I just felt this energy. I just pointed him out in the room before even talking to him. And then when I talked to him, it was like the weirdest thing. We had the same earphones. We had the same iPad case. We had the same everything. And I was like, this is very strange. But he had this calmness to him. And I'm very, all over the place, right? But he had this calmness. And as we were talking, I started to notice like he's nurturing, he's supportive, and he has his legacy is about making a difference in the world. But for him, the biggest value that he has is to be loved. He wanted love and making a difference, and it didn't matter to him. There's your the person is their home, right? So location doesn't matter. This doesn't matter. And and when I met him, I was in a messy situation then, and I was like, this is it. I don't care if my whole life blows up. I need to be with this man because this is what I dreamed of my whole life, and it's here in front of me. And sure, we had like a lots of challenges too because we both blew up our lives to be together, right? So of course that was going to be messy. Um, but then once that subsided, it's amazing, and I think that's what I love about speaking with him because he can send those messages right to women and to men around the world that it doesn't make you less masculine to support a woman, and actually like by him supporting me, our relationship is so much stronger, right? Because then I feel like I can have my dreams, I can live my purpose. I'm present for him, I'm present for the kids, right? I'm showing example that we can do this. And then and he's part of it, right? And our legacies are aligned, and our dreams are aligned, and every time I see us as a family, I'm sometimes I wake up and I can't believe it's my life, like I'm like, wow, like I found this and we have this great family. It's all about growth, and we do therapy, right? And we do coaching to always better ourselves, and it's great. And
Yeah.
I told him with our book, I was like, are you sure you don't want your name on it too? And because he helped me so much, and he was like, no, this is your story. You know what I mean? He's like, no way. And I was like, okay, but
It's so special.
yeah, it's really, really amazing. And I think we need more of that in
Mm.
the world to show that it's possible.
Yeah, like he's a lovely guy. So, and also, like our team is working with you, your husband Paul, booking on different podcasts and promoting the book. So, when you started exploring different ways to promote the book, what exactly happened? Like, why did you decide to work with authors on mission? Because in last 3, 4 months, you have also referred a lot of people in your circle to us. Um, before you started working with us, exactly what did you see? Why did you hire us? And what was your experience so far working with us? And what exactly do you see in us that you recommend so many people in your circle to us?
Yeah, no, I think what I loved, so it's funny because it was actually, I got a cold call. I think a cold request, right? From someone on your team. And then I looked at your stuff, and for me, I thought what I loved about it was the podcast at first, right? And I was like, well, I had been on a couple, but what I liked is that what I love about your team actually is that you study the brand of the person, you study how the person's style and their brand and their messaging, and really find podcasts and avenues where they can give out their message that's aligned with them. So for me, like the podcast has been such an amazing process because I've met these amazing hosts, that have like such similar messaging and legacies, and then I can do like the things we're doing now, right? These exercises, and they can ask me questions as well. And then we connect. A lot of the podcast hosts actually are now my friends, which is great, right? Like we talk now all the time, and for me, it's about building community. So what I love about the podcasting is that you build community, not just with the listeners, but with the hosts themselves, right? That are in this mission as well to make this change in the world, right? If you're in podcasting, it's because you have like this bigger mission and you want to give these stories out to the world. And so that has been amazing because they're like all over the world, amazing messages. And and through that, the listeners have gone back to me. I just got one today, actually, that she heard that one of the podcasts that came out this week. And it's this woman that she was also born in Nicaragua, but now lives in Australia, and she's like, I was so inspired by that. And see that to me, that just makes my whole week or month. You know what I mean? That look, and now I'm connected to this other woman in Australia. So podcasts, I think like at first I was kind of like, yeah, I want to do podcasts, but when I started it, I didn't realize how impactful it would be, and how it creates this whole domino effect. And that's when I was like, no, Paul, you have to do this. And he's like, okay. And he's loved it too, because for him, I want him equally how he wants me to shine. I want him to shine. And he has an amazing message and life, and he can also be such, he's also an inspiration to me. So he likes being able to have that platform as well that he hasn't been able
Yeah.
to. So and he's loved it. He's loved it. And on top of that, right? Let's say like so the podcast has that intrinsic value. But I think like on other things in terms of our business, right? It helps with SEO. It helps with Google. Like it gives
Yeah.
people a taste of what we're like speaking, because then from the podcast, we were able to share in front of so I did my book tour. I'm on my book tour. And to get on my book tour, I wanted to speak at conferences, right? Because then you have a large venue that you can also sell books. And there, to apply to those at first, you submit an abstract, but I would add the links to the podcast I've been on, right? So that people get a feel like this is my message I'm saying, this is what I talk about. And people appreciate that, right? Because they're not getting then like they get a flavor for who you are, what the things you talk about, what's your message. So I think even in terms of like business branding and how your style is and your voice, it helps with that, and now I've put it all into like a Spotify track with all of them there, right? So it's like one easy link that you can send out. So I've because my clients are also people who want to trailblaze, I'm like, you gotta be doing this, right? And so the people I refer are the people, the ones that I'm like, their messages is equally inspiring, right? That need to share it with people that are aligned with them. And I'm like, I think your team is the best to find the people that would be aligned with them. That's what I love about your team. Your team does the research, and then they also check in with you, like, do you like this one? Do you not? You know what I mean? And so you always have this nice responsive collaboration that then fulfills your own legacy and also helps with like whatever goals you have.
Right. And what do you think how your books have impacted your personal and professional life? Like if you compare your life before book and then after book, like after you publish the book, what exactly has changed?
A lot. The well, the book, I would say personally, like for myself, I think it helped me grow in so many ways. Like now my story is out, to the world, right? And now my parents have read it too. And and so all of that, there's no more holding back. So I think that was the biggest effect that it had on me personally and in my mindset is having that book out. I can be fully authentic with who I am, and I feel also that a lot of that fear has gone away. So that's on a personal front. On in terms of like an impact front, it's been pretty amazing, right? Because I get a lot of like different private one-on-one messages, about like I read this section, it means I so much, I relate to this, and also if you were vulnerable, that means I can be vulnerable, right? And that I hadn't thought about it that way, or I did the exercise, and it is a longer book. So people share with me like when they're at different stages, and sometimes the messages are like a month or two scattered through. Um, but that's been really, really impactful. In terms of me as like the movement and the business, I mean, having a book has helped me in the speaking roles, right? Because in the speaking roles, I could share a piece of it and also pieces of my story of the formula and the impact in my workshops. And then it's nice to give the people that are there, like you give them a product that they can continue, right, using for themselves. And so yeah, I think in terms of like my speaking, it's helped boom that part and the workshops. It has helped deliver the message more clear, like more out there. And I think it's helped like in terms of like even like the business SEO and all of that having the book. So it's been a win-win-win overall in all aspects, personally and professionally and and all of it. Yeah.
So you have finally like you were able to write the book and you know the ins and outs of exactly how does it work. What suggestions do you have for aspiring writers like who are struggling to write their own book?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I'm going to tell the authors it's tough. Um, I would also recommend that they work, if it's with your company or another one, like I don't recommend authors to do it by themselves, so I would definitely say that because I think when I worked with you guys have been like absolutely amazing. I think like, and I would say definitely for the promotion, don't do it by yourself either. You know what I mean? Because it's a lot like because you have to manage figuring out your own book tour, your own stuff, right? And I think your team helps with like, everything. Like you guys have a whole package of ways of promoting your book that people should really look at and really do because like I've tried all sorts of things on my own, and that's why when you guys came, I was like, oh, no, 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 this is what I need. Like you guys know how the whole system works, and that's key. And but in terms of like writing it themselves, I know your company also helps with that. Like I used an Australian company, and and they gave me an author coach. I had an author coach, And that, I'm so glad I didn't do it alone, because when we're in our own heads, like again, I only thought initially about just sharing my formula, and what a mistake that would have been, to not have shared my story. And plus, I didn't know about, like, mine is at the max of what a book should be in length of a self-help. Like all of these things, like as an author, you shouldn't worry about. Like worry about like word count or formatting. They help with like marketing, like what type of paper your audience would like, and the fonts and the read. And so like for me, I would recommend don't do it alone, um, because the other person can help, whether it's a company or an author coach or you guys, whatever it is, right? They can help be like, actually, like, remember, because the book is about serving an audience and
Mhm.
it's about maximizing the impact. And I think having that company and it's really helping me understand that, the publisher being like, we are here to serve an audience and they need to hear your story, they need to hear examples, let's try to digest this, right? I then was able to, you're still the writer, I could still write in and like make the edits accordingly, but I think having that mindset that it's about serving the person, that helped me then make the book, right, a lot more conversational. Because, I come from an academic background in government where I'm just like, I even want to be less conversational. And they're like, no, you're talking to a friend. And I'm like, okay, I need to rewrite this and rewrite this. But
Yeah,
I think doing it by myself would have been a huge mistake. It wouldn't have been the quality that it is right now. It wouldn't have the paper and the look that it has right now. Um, I think it just, someone else helps you put the vision together, and I think, and then you guys have helped really put the message out there for me, right? Because then it's one thing, like when you finish the book, the next part is, okay, but you don't want it to, I definitely was like, this book cannot sit on a shelf. Like this book needs to go out there. Yeah.
great. So it's sort of like I still have 50 more questions to ask you, but I know that there's so many things, like everything is actually, I'm having a lot of questions for you, but I know that there's a time constraint. So, but it was so um, enlightening talking to you. And I'm definitely going to be checking out your book, Creating Your Limitless Life. I'm going to read it, also fill out the workbook. So if the listeners want to know more about you, about your book, where they can find you.
For sure. They can, so I have an Instagram, and that's where I put a lot more fun reels and I do stories every day. That's b.act.change. And then I'm also on LinkedIn, right? Just my name, Esther Zeledon. So those are the two major platforms that I use. You can find me there. I also have a website, beactchange.com. But yeah, if you want to send me a message on LinkedIn, Instagram, I'm very responsive. For me, it's all about building community. So if there's part of the book that really resonated with you, or you have questions or anything, that's what I'm there. That's what I'm here for.
I love it, Esther. Thank you so much for being on the show. It was so fun chatting with you. And thank you so much, listeners, for tuning in.